Monday Mornings with Matt and Kevin.
Welcome into Monday Mornings with Matt and Kevin here on the Catholic Family Podcast. These two will debate real-life issues from a Catholic perspective every Monday at 9 Eastern. Topics that will come up around the dinner table will be given the truth treatment with no punches held and no falsehood left standing. Sit back, relax, grab your cup of coffee, and enjoy the show. Here are your hosts, Matt and Kevin.
Good morning, everyone. Monday Mornings with Matt and Kevin here on the Catholic Family Podcast. And 10 years ago today, non Habemus Papam. How did I do that, Kevin?
Still.
Habemus Papa.
Right.
So we've got a lot to talk about on today's show. Obviously, today being the 10-year anniversary of the so-called election of Jorge Mario Bergoglio. Kevin's got a great show coming up this afternoon with Mario Dirksen of Novus Ordo Watch Live. So you would be able to tune in and watch that as it happens. I spoke to them both separately. I told them both to make sure that their shirts are ironed, that their tie clips are on. And so that's going to be something really to look forward to. But a few topics that we wanted to kind of touch base on today, review. And I came across a story, Kevin, that I was talking with you about briefly earlier, and it was very, very interesting. And I thought about it, and I kind of wanted to get your thoughts and maybe the listeners' comments as well. So in our area here, locally, there was a simple, really a block of wood, a wooden post that is kind of in the center of the city. And I've walked by it 1,000,001 times, never had any idea what it was, didn't even catch my eye, really. I know that I've seen it once I saw it on the news, but never really stuck out to me as something that, like, oh, what is that? I never wondered what it was until it made headlines. So it turns out that in this town green area here, where there's, buses and benches and trees and bushes or whatever, there's this, and statues, there's this block of wood, and it turns out that it is a whipping post from the time of slavery. And it turns out, I did some research because I wanted to make sure I had my T's crossed and my I's dotted before we came on, that this post is an original from the 1700s. And it was put there in this spot from 1750-ish or so, and used up until the time of slavery. And it stayed there until recently. And of course, there was an outcry that it has to get removed. We can't have this here. It is offensive, the whole litany of things the social justice warriors like to go on about. And it's something that I've thought about in my own mind here. And I thought, like, well, should something like this be removed? Remember, we had the big Confederate statue thing. Should those things be taken away? It's been a thing that has really graced this country the last few years, and both sides made their arguments. You can probably, off the top of your head, come up with what you would hear from both sides anyway, but one side said, yeah, this is offensive. This is original. This is in its exact spot it was placed in. And like I said, according to the people who studied it and know about it, that piece of wood that you can touch is from 1750-ish or so. And then you have your other side of the debate saying, well, no, this is a piece of history. This is something that kind of marks our city and shows how far we've come and what life used to be like. And it's a good reminder to people. And it's something that is here for us to, to look at and if you could touch it, it's just out in the plain open, that kind of, connects us with our past. And, it ended up getting taken down, as I'm sure you would probably have guessed. They determined that it wasn't very welcoming. People didn't feel comfortable. People didn't feel safe, which I don't know. They interviewed people, Kev. They took people on the streets, with the microphone, and they asked, what are your thoughts? And all of these people went on and on about how this is very offensive. They can't look at it. It's cruel. It brings back a lot of painful memories. I guarantee 2 weeks ago, they didn't even know what it was. They were only offended once they were told to be offended. But I don't know. I take the view of that. I thought it was neat to have up. Basically, what you do is, if you can picture a tree, they would handcuff you and tie your hands, and it would be like you're hugging a tree, and then you would get whipped for your crimes.
Was it only for slaves, or is it for anybody who committed a crime?
That was not clear. I think from what I've read, they kind of geared the conversation towards slavery, that
Sure they did.
it was used, right, exactly. But there's other evidence too in historical records, in some, I guess they found some town hall files from the 1800s or whatever, that it was used for crimes, public shame, public penance, I guess you could sort of call it. And it meant something to a lot of people in different ways. And so it went viral because this girl, this is how it started. This girl had a photo shoot by it, a black girl. And she posed as if she was a 18th century slave here. And she posted it. It was a very well coordinated scene. It was the lighting. She had the makeup to make it look like she was being beaten and all of that. And that's what kind of started the conversation. So it made me think of how we have these other statues and these other landmarks in our country that these last few years people have deemed offensive. And a bit surprising, some of the so-called conservative governors, Nikki Haley of South Carolina comes to mind, they removed them. They agreed with the populist crowd saying that this was offensive, it should go. And
well,
I
some of these things that, I mean, see, there's a lot to unpack here. I mean, I think first of all, I am hugely
really
in favor of public corporal punishment. Now, I'm hugely not in favor of slavery. So if it was a whipping post that was only used for slaves, then I totally 100% actually do understand that people would be upset about that and that they'd want it removed, because slavery absolutely is a black eye on the history of Western civilization, not just Western, of the whole world, and America was part of it. Now, that being said, if it was just a whipping post for everybody, then okay. I mean, and I think that's probably the case here. And you see that people just start picking and choosing parts of history, and that's not just dumb. It's dangerous because you start to see again that they're going to rewrite history, and this is what happens all throughout history. Obviously, that it gets rewritten, and so instead of remembering that, well, actually, back in the 1800s, the Irish were treated worse than the African slaves. Again, slavery was terrible, but the Irish were treated worse. But that fact is just wiped away because because the Irish aren't loud enough. I suppose I don't really entirely know why.
But I was just going to say what really gets me with things like this, right, is they seem to suddenly become an issue 150 years later. Slavery was abolished in 1865. It is 2023. Why is it taking up until now for people to decide that this post is offensive? Why did they take it down when slavery ended? Which is a sign to me that it probably wasn't just a slavery post. I think if it was just for slaves, once all this happened in the mid 1800s, they would have gotten rid of that.
Right. I mean, you're in the Northeast.
You would think.
Now, if you're down in Alabama or Georgia, right. Honestly, I think there probably still is some racism down there. I think racism does exist, unfortunately, in the world. I've seen it even here in Bavaria. And I think that's a shame. I think it's shameful. And it's obviously not Catholic or Christian in any way. But again, you're up in the Northeast. I mean, come on, that's not going to happen. I bet you that this is just a whipping post for people who did bad, and sometimes it was slaves, and sometimes it was bad white guys. I think that's, and I think, but it's a really interesting question and a really interesting topic, because I think I'm actually fairly split when it comes to the statues, because I think that it depends on who it is. I mean, if they're in the United States of America, and let's say you have Stonewall Jackson and he was actually a pretty good guy, but let's give him as an example, or Robert E. Lee, who was a very moral person, a very gentlemanly man, but they were rebels against the state. So I'm not saying morally or whatever, but just the fact that their statues are allowed to remain in the country which they tried to leave. I don't know. I mean, I think I kind of understand why people would be like, really? These guys tried to, they fought a war against America. And I'm pro-South. I'm even pro-South. I'm just saying I understand. I shouldn't say I'm pro-South.
You don't like the snow?
I think the North and South is a much more complex part of history than we're taught in our history books. I mean, I think Abraham Lincoln was maybe the worst president of all time, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't know. I get the argument, I suppose.
And it's just kind of like I said too when I was kind of introducing it, I guarantee you people had no idea what that thing was, because I don't know if I could post a picture, but it was just randomly there, and it was mixed in. It's not like it's just you're in an open field and there's this random post that's in front of you. There's a bunch of commotion going around.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, to me, again, I passed it a million times. I don't think I've ever gave it a second thought, but I think there's always something that's neat in me anyway, to know that if I were to touch that pole, that was used in the 1700s. I think that's a really cool connection. We, unlike Europe, America doesn't have this history where, like you walk into this church that's 1500 years old. It's like, we don't have that. So the churches and the historical things that are here that are from like the 1800s, early 1900s feel ancient to us. So to be able to look at that and just really just wonder, I think it's a really good teaching piece. I don't, especially as we said, if it was used for public crimes, and public punishment, corporal punishment, I think it is a really good teaching moment. And I don't think that it does really any good to dig it up out of I don't know how heavy, I don't know how they got it out there, but you can see there's this clip of a couple men picked it up. They had tools, but they picked it up and they carried it away. And I don't know if they saved it, if they burned it. I have no idea, but it's really cool to me to be able to look at something like that and connect to your past, whether good or bad, and use it, as I said, as a teaching moment, and use it as something to say, like, this is what it was used for. And people that lived in this area touched this very post, used this very thing. And to me, once I get to that kind of point, my mind starts to go in directions of like, oh, what did these people do and like during their day? Like, how did they eat? What was a day-to-day life like for them? So my mind just goes in a billion different places.
How was the whipping? Was the whipping nice?
Was there a crowd around it?
Yeah, right. I mean, did they eat their oats and then get whipped?
Exactly. Like, I don't know. So again, I think you're offended if you want to be, but to be able to look at it and keep perspective, I think, nobody here has any connection to that. I doubt it. So all it took, again, was one woman to post some, instigation clips and an uproar. Really,
but this is an interesting point too, and I think that's something that we see. This always happens from the left, right? The people on the left are the ones who are always whining and complaining and tearing down statues, right? They're the ones who always get their way because they're the loudest and their stuff goes viral. Now, it's probably just because part of it is because that's how things work, that things are controlled that way. It all funnels towards their direction. But why don't we do more of that stuff? I mean, really, there's plenty of statues out there. Let's say, what's the guy's name? Albert Pike. You know what Albert Pike was? He was a Civil War colonel, I think, maybe general.
I'm not familiar.
He ended up being the lead Freemason in the U.S. He founded like the Freemason Lodge and was a practitioner of all sorts of really, 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 really bad stuff. And his statues are up. I know several of them for sure around the U.S. Now, people say, "Yeah, well, he was historical," but no, dude was a terrible, terrible human being. And his statues should absolutely not be up. There should be no reason why a kid goes and says, wow, he must have been a good guy because his statue's up in the marketplace. That's ridiculous. And I think that's an interesting question because I think, Jefferson Davis, I don't know if he was a terrible guy. I don't know much about him myself. But again, he rebelled against the United States. Now, whatever position you take on that, why is his statue still up in the United States? It's a really interesting question. And I think it's one that, you can obviously go too far. You start tearing down statues of George Washington. It's like, okay, what are you going to put up? And that's actually another point. Have you seen the garbage they put up in place of these statues? It's unbelievable.
That's it. Yeah.
Imagine a Novus Ordo church, and that's what the art looks like, pretty much.
Where was that Martin Luther King Jr. statue that they just put up? I don't know if you saw that, but it was just like a blob. And it's like they unveiled this thing, like they just unveiled, the next Pieta here. Like this was just a big event, and I think even people who were looking forward to it, like raised an eyebrow. Like, what am I even?
It looks like. I mean, cover your ears. But
I was gonna say this is rated G.
It looks like someone's holding a big poo, Matt. That's just what it looks like. I'm sorry, that's what it looks like. Now, I don't even, again, take out all politics and whatever beliefs, but it is so. I mean, how do people look at that and think this is going to be great? This is going to look so. People 100 years from now are going to look at this and say, "Wow!"
And blow that. I give permission to tear down statues.
Yes, sometimes,
blow that thing up.
Yes, exactly. No. Well, I think that some things. Look at the Georgia Guidestones. I don't know if you know that story. These crazy stones out in, I think Georgia, right? Yeah, I think in the middle of Georgia, and they're like these end of the world Guidestones. And someone took a rocket launcher to them a couple of years ago, blew them up. And hey, good for the person who blew them up, because not everything should be allowed to stand. And I think again, that's a really conservative, quote unquote, mindset, is that let's just let be, let it be. We're not going to fight for it. Just let everyone have their way. No, that's not how things work. If it's good, then it's good. If it's bad, then it's bad. And if it's bad, it should not stand, and we should fight against it.
I think there are a lot of conservatives, and I used to really I was big into conservative talk radio maybe a decade or so ago. I couldn't, I had to listen to the Hannitys, the Glenn Beck. I really tuned in all that sort of stuff. And, when I listened later on, I realized wow, how actually non-Catholic a lot of what they push really, really is. In fact, I was listening to a show not too long ago. It was one of those Fox News type conservative talk shows. And, they were saying that, there's nowhere in the Constitution that the government should control art. That was one of the topics. And I thought, at the time I would have said, wow, that must be the conservative position. But now when you think about it, in a proper society, the church would control all of the art. It would be beautiful. So again, I think a lot of these conservative principles are really just rooted in Protestantism, rooted in constitutionalism, that really don't have a good Catholic.
It's exactly right, Matt. And look exactly what happens with libertarianism. This whole idea of live and let live. It leads to what does it lead to? Pornography? I mean, what else? I mean, these things are like, oh, it's fine. It's, everyone has the right to. No, they don't. It should absolutely be banned. That kind of stuff. Look at the rap music. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. This rap music that is absolutely horrific. It is leading it's not even just leading souls to hell. It is also leading men to go shoot other men and to do terrible things to women. That is in the lyrics. These men who produce this content should be in prison. Period.
They're doing this. I don't know if you've heard with the drag queen shows for children. There are some states. I don't know if it was DeSantis. I know it's been a thing lately in the news, but there are some states that are taking action, saying that you can't do a very, very explicit drag queen show in a kindergarten classroom. And you, the funny thing is a lot of libertarians are suddenly, they agree, we should ban this. Well, how is that not live and let live? How is that not do whatever you want? As long as, if I want to take my child to a show like this, I should be able to. All of a sudden they find their sense of morality. It seems like sometimes, all of a sudden their live and let live, do whatever you want kind of goes away when certain boundaries are crossed.
Well, Matt, look at the life, love, and pursuit of happiness. Pursuit of happiness. What does that mean? What does that mean? That's in our declaration. I mean, what
is liberty?
Happiness? Yeah. I mean, right. Good point. Exactly. And pursuit of happiness, that is a really dangerous thing. Okay. Maybe my happiness is going and punching random people in the face. What are you going to do about it? That's my pursuit. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It should be maybe the pursuit of God, or the pursuit of good, or the pursuit of morality, but the pursuit of happiness, that's not one of our rights. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And it shows you again, we're blinded by it, because we're blinded by our love and patriotism of America, which is a good thing, but we're blinded by a lot of our founding principles are just wrong.
If you connect the dots, that's going to lead you to every single vice, right? My pursuit of happiness is going to lead me to gluttony. My pursuit of happiness is going to lead me to sloth. My pursuit of happiness is going to lead me to lust. Every pursuit of happiness is going to end with that, right?
It's hedonism.
Completely contrary.
It's exactly. Father McKenna and I just did a podcast about hedonism.
Yes,
it's exactly what it is. It's all about getting everything you can for your own pleasure. It's all about pleasure, and that's almost like in the American Constitution.
It's like last week, the what was the quality? What makes a good quality woman? Right,
high value.
High value. Right. That's there you go. And again, it's rooted in such things like that. Right, pursuing liberty, do whatever I want. What does that even mean? Again, they place boundaries on things like, again, this drag queen show. Is it liberty if I want to do it? I don't know, all of a sudden they have boundaries and they have, steps that they say, oh, that's a little too far. Well, by whose standard? By whose judgment? Why not? The left, who endorses these drag queen shows, why not have, I don't know, why not have some other sort of thing because they say, oh, we're exposing the kids to diversity. Why not have, I don't know, alien, tattoos? God, why don't we expose them to other things like this? I don't know. So it all gets mushy waters. And again, you're always safe when you follow the church. That's the beautiful thing of our faith, is that everything is just infallibly safe. And that kind of brings me up into our next topic here, because this has made its rounds, and I brought it up on Twitter, and it went all over the place. I was driving home the other day, about a week ago, actually, and there's about a 2-hour-long podcast on the SSPX, which recently came out. And this is going to tie into Bergoglio's 10-year reign here. And if you listen to it, if you could go to podcasts, however you listen, look at the SSPX. They have an official channel, and they have what the Society of St. Pius X got right, or how they're right. And at the very, very beginning, it's like 4 minutes in, so you don't have to listen to the whole thing. It's right at the beginning. They say, the priest says that the Pope collectively with his bishops do not teach the Catholic faith. And I slammed the brakes on that. I actually screen recorded the audio clip. I posted it on Twitter. It blew up among both sides, as you'd imagine. And the thing is somebody commented, and I kind of want to touch on this really quickly as we kind of swerve into Bergoglio here. Somebody said, and you've heard this argument before, he's the Pope that we deserve, right? That seems to be their way of handling this situation. And something that these people cannot do, and it is what led me out of this movement, is there's absolutely nothing anywhere in any magisterial document that says that if the people are living immoral, sinful lives, that the church will become means of damnation, that she will somehow punish you in a way that will, in order to be saved, you need to resist. She will always be a means of salvation. She will always be a bastion of truth. She will always be a refuge of sinners. And so I challenge these people, and I want to pull it up really quick here. Sometimes we get kind of accused of taking quotes out of context. I think a lot of sides get that accusation, but sometimes we get accused of that too. And I think I hold this up all the time, and again, nobody can see me, but if you take Denzinger, I've pushed this 50,000 times on Twitter. If you take Denzinger and look at every single quote, take a highlighter and spend 2 weeks, it doesn't matter how long, look at every single quote on the papacy, the powers of the Pope, how we view the Pope, what the Pope can do, you will never, ever, ever, ever once find anything that supports their position. I've taken the time to do it. It's what led me here. And I wanted to read just a few things as we, touch on this Bergoglio's decade-long reign of, do we just have a bad Pope? Do we have a Pope that doesn't really know what he's doing? And I wanted to read some quotes here from Denzinger really quick for the audience, Kevin, and then we could kind of touch on what you're going to kind of maybe give us a little preview of the show today. So this is, and I'll give you citations real quick here as well. Denzinger, 1835, quote, "With the power from the Lord himself and blessed Peter, of whom the Roman pontiff is the successor, just as it is bound above others to defend the truth of faith, so too, if any question arises about the faith, it should be defined by its judgment." The Pope is the final say in matters of faith. Denzinger, 740b, "You will firmly abide by the true decisions of the Holy Roman Church, and to this see, which does not permit errors." Denzinger, 1836, "The see of Peter remains unpaired by any error. This gift of truth and a never failing faith was divinely conferred upon Peter and his successors." See Denzinger, 1831 here, "The Roman pontiff is the supreme judge of all of the faithful. His authority is surpassed by no one, and no one may pass judgment on his judgments. He has full and supreme power over the church in discipline and governance, and no one may resist or appeal his judgments." I paraphrased that one a little bit here. Denzinger, 246, just one or two more here. Denzinger, 246, "Consider, most dear ones, that the truth cannot have lied, nor will the faith of Peter be able to be shaken or changed. And lastly here, Denzinger, 1827, the faithful are bound to true obedience to the Roman pontiff, not only in things which pertain to faith and morals, but also which pertain to discipline and governance of the church. No one can deviate from this and keep his salvation. Those are just a few examples out of Denzinger. That is all you will find. That same one message again and again and again and again and again. You will never find this position of recognize and resist, that the church will be punished with a pope that not only will be bad, but will collectively impose heresy and error on the church. I will delete my Twitter account permanently if you can pull up a magisterial document that expresses this opinion. And people have said in the comments, there's never in the history of the church has there ever been sedevacante. Never in the history of the church has there been your position, the things what you claim that the Pope is actually somehow doing while retaining his office. It's not there. So happy 10 years, Kevin.
Well, and these guys, unfortunately, as you see them on Twitter, and I've seen some of the comments on your post, that they're really just jumping through hoops trying to find a solution, which they know cannot be. Now, I just saw on Twitter on the same type of topic, a guy who I'm sure you know quite well, Flat Calf, Alberto. I think he seems like a nice guy, a guy I want to like. He posted, if the church in Germany is blessing same-sex unions and your bishop is still in communion with the German bishops, you are not Catholic. Right. I responded, and if your Pope is still in communion with them, and it's like, I mean, it's not I'm this genius theologian. This was like the most obvious answer to this guy who's clearly recognized and resist. And it's like,
can you read that? Can you read that again? Read his actual tweet, because I want people to actually think about this like really, really slow and see again if it makes sense.
Right. So this guy is very strong. He's a very strong R&R, very strong recognize and resist. Yes. Absolutely against sedevacantism. Again, I think a fine guy. I'm not saying he's a bad guy whatsoever. Probably has good intentions. But remember, he says that Bergoglio somehow is the Pope. This is what he says, quote, if the church in Germany is blessing same-sex unions, which they are, right, and your bishop is still in communion with the German bishops, you are not Catholic. This is a guy who is saying that the Pope...
So think about this. In order to remain Catholic, I must enter into schism and be excommunicated. That is the summary. That is the end goal here. That I have to recognize and resist so hard that if I need to maintain my faith, then I need to be excommunicated by these people in power, the hierarchy here. And again, is this what Christ? You have to ask yourself: is this what Christ set up? Did Christ give us a church? As Augustine said, the church is Christ's very body. It is truly his. It is, as Pius XII worded beautifully, the spotless bride of Christ, who, just like her spouse, will never have blemish, will never have stain. The details here kind of get a little murky, because what they say here is, well, the church never imposed this. The church never, defined errors that I have to adhere to. And they miss with a huge stroke the universal ordinary magisterium, which is Pius XII, I believe it was the 12th or the 9th, one of those two, said is exercised daily, every single day. This collective body of bishops, together with the Pope. You may have some stragglers, sure, but collectively, they safeguard the true faith. That is we believe the Holy Spirit guides the church. And that is how I almost said James Martin would have called, that's how she guides the church. That's how the Holy Ghost, guides the church by preventing this collective body of bishops, together with the Pope, from teaching error. If you put these men in a room and said, raise your hand, who here does not support the new mass and opposes the documents of the council, I don't know if anybody's going to raise their hand. This collective group here is the one Pope's authority is the same as the other, right? Paul VI doesn't somehow have higher authority than Pius V, and Pius V doesn't have higher authority than Paul VI if he was a true pope. And Mario talked about this in Novus Ordo Watch's 170th podcast. It was, if Paul VI was a true pope, quo primum is toast. It's history, because he has full supreme power and authority and jurisdiction to command and to rule the church. If I have to remain Catholic and separate myself from this authority, what in the world did Christ give us? A mess. He gave us chaos. He gave us a church that is, it's a do-it-yourself church that is run by my judgment. And again, I will delete my account. I will put this out there for people to hear. I will delete my account if you can give me actual magisterial documents that support this position. Not Taylor Marshall, not Marcel Lefebvre, not Matt Gaspers talking about the eternal magisterium of all time, whatever. That's absolutely, these things are nowhere. They make them up, and they think that they're really, connecting the dots here. It's nuts.
Well, and as you say, it is nuts, and it's something that I think we both need to say. Again, Matt was formerly SSPX, so he knows this trip. He knows that these Absolutely. Are things that you can fall into. And I don't want us to sound like we're beating a dead horse type of a thing, but I think that it's still things that we need to hear. I mean, I saw a guy on Twitter, again, one of this group of R&R guys that I'm sure you know also well. Sure. And they're talking about, I think, the excommunication of Archbishop Lefebvre and maybe somebody else. I think it was Lefebvre. And the guy says, well, it's a badge of honor to be excommunicated by this group.
Yes.
And it's like, wait, what? You can't say that. I mean, it's like, guys, if you're saying he's the Pope and he excommunicates you, you are damned to hell at that moment. Until you, hopefully, you are brought back into the church. I mean, that is so absolutely absurd, and they don't see it, Matt. They don't see it. It's like, you can't say something like that. That's not how this works.
Here it is. I have the quote right here. This is Marcel Lefebvre. To be publicly associated, so publicly, let everybody know it, to be publicly associated with the sanction of excommunication from John Paul II would be a mark of honor and, get this last line here, a sign of orthodoxy before the faithful. So in order for me to be a true Orthodox, faithful, good Catholic, I must be excommunicated. That
by the real church.
You have to hear yourself say these things. But then the funny thing is they don't know if they want it or not. And I've asked this question to them, many of them, and there's no real clear answer. Do they want to be excommunicated? Because if you push back and you say the SSPX is in schism, they say no or not. The excommunications were invalid, right? They say Benedict lifted the excommunications. He knew that they were wrong. There are no excommunications. I thought you wanted them. So is it a badge of honor to have this mark of excommunication because it's your sign of orthodoxy, or are you afraid of it? And the answer is they don't know, for the simple reason. And I was here. We don't know. And I say we because I was in this boat, is because we want this excommunication because we don't want to be associated with this group of hierarchy. But we know what the consequences are of that word, right? We can't change the definition of what it means to be excommunicated. It can't mean one thing for 1950 years and all of a sudden, at this day and age, mean a good thing. Excommunication is really, it is a good thing in the sense that it's Holy Mother Church extending her hand as a means of punishment to really straighten you out, right? It's a means to say that you are in error and you need to rectify and change your beliefs and conform to us. That is what excommunication is, right? I get to use all air quotes here. You're misbehaving. You are not in line with the magisterium of the church. You bear the mark of excommunication. Reconsider here and repent. That's what it means. The church can't. Congratulations, here's your excommunication. Now you're really Catholic. It was Pius I want to say the 11th, I believe it was, who said the orthodoxy of every Catholic is up to the Holy See to decide. So if you want to come out here and say I'm really an Orthodox Catholic, I'm really true, traditional, to the core here, everything in the deposit of faith I possess, that is only determined by the Holy See. So did that suddenly change after all these years? Why is that the decision of the Holy See? Because the faith of Peter cannot fail. Because the true faith will always be found in this chair, cannot totter and fall ever. It will never permit errors. It was Bellarmine who said, if the Pope were to err, then the whole church would err. So these definitions are mingled up with one another, and they try to make it more complex than it is. I think someone told me, again, one of these guys in this group, he said, well, you don't understand the definition of schism. You don't understand the inner workings of schism and all of that. It's a lot more complicated. And I replied back, no, it's not. It's just that it's complicated if you try to rethink it. It's complicated if you try to connect the dots here and make something fit into to fit a square inside a circle, right? That's what makes it complicated. But on the clear, face value, it's very simple. Don't make it too hard at all.
Yep. No, I'm into that. And I think that a lot of this craziness we see, especially recently, is because they know that Bergoglio gets crazier and crazier, and that he will get crazier and crazier, and whoever follows him will get crazier and crazier.
Make the world Catholic again.
Like what you hear? Be sure to subscribe to the Catholic Family Podcast.